More detail. I'm joined now by Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, President America of the Middle East Policy Council. Madam, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We were seeing pictures there of Hostage Square. A lot of people still concerned that even though phase one seems to be going well, we may never actually get to phase two. So first of all, your reaction to what you've been seeing over this first week, the second exchange, what have you made of it?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think many of us around the world are relieved and delighted to see the hostages begin to come home from the very beginning. And we saw from the first ceasefire, where the vast majority of hostages were released, that diplomacy is the way to get folks home whole and alive and to their families. So we've had this long 15-month-long conflict. Many were killed during that time, whether in Hamas captivity or by IDF action in the Gaza Strip. This is so important to get them home and also to get Palestinians out of Israeli detention. We know that in the first tranche, 60 of the Palestinians released were women and children, minors, who had been arrested or detained without charge by the Israeli government. This next section of Palestinian prisoners, also there are women, parliamentarians, and journalists who were detained by Israelis. So this exchange is key. The challenge, of course, is that normally when you have these steps, you build confidence that it can go on. In this case, unfortunately, because of comments made by Israeli leadership that this is temporary, that they're ready to go back to fighting, it is fragile. And we see, of course, what has happened in Lebanon with the Israeli government saying they would not adhere to the agreement and withdraw completely from Lebanese territory. This also makes this agreement more fragile.
I mean, you mentioned, of course, it's fragile, and they always tend to be. And we've seen a sort of disagreement over the release or lack of release of Arbel Yehud, who is an Israeli female civilian. But you have been a U.S. diplomat for 30 years. You worked for the U.S. State Department after that as an official. You know the power of American influence on foreign affairs. I'm wondering what you make, I guess, of the Trump factor that we could mention right now and some of the statements he's made. He said a deal should hold. If it doesn't, there will be a lot of problems. How much pressure and what kind of pressure do you think Donald Trump is putting on all of this?
Well, this is an area where he is playing, I believe, a positive role. Many people are concerned about his international policies, but the reality is President Biden, for all of the work that diplomats did during his administration, he was unable to get this ceasefire to the finish line. He could not do it. The secretary couldn't do it. And it did take, even before him taking office, words from President Trump of saying he wants this done, and he wanted it done before he came into office. He is the one that can keep the parties at the table and adhering to it as best as possible. And that is because he has made clear he's willing to use sticks as well as carrots. I believe on both sides, although it's difficult to see what more could be done to Hamas than the Israeli government and the IDF have done in the last 15 months. They were successful in really taking away Hamas's ability to wage a robust defense in the Gaza Strip. But President Trump is saying, stick to this deal. And of course, the Israeli opposition has said, even if right-wing members of the coalition step back to get the hostages home, that they would support the government. So on the one hand, it's extraordinarily fragile. The hostage families will have to keep pressure on the Netanyahu government to say, don't let it stop after this first phase. We have people we need to get home, but it's going to take President Trump as well.
I mean, you mentioned he's going to use sticks and stones. One thing is a ceasefire deal. Another is trying to solve the underlying issue, an unresolved conflict over territory and cohabitation between Israelis and Palestinians. Do you think his ambition extends to that? Or do you think once he can say, well, I've sorted out the ceasefire, that might be it?
That remains to be seen. We have heard comments from him and his son-in-law about rebuilding the Gaza Strip. There were some kind of wild comments about moving all Palestinians out while it's rebuilt. But no one trusts that if Palestinians are moved out, that they would be allowed to move back in. So I think that's a non-starter. The other thing that President Trump is going to have to be very careful about is his eagerness to see more interaction with Israel and countries within the Abraham Accords. And that will require Israel sticking to this deal. Many of the countries, not all of them, but many of them do have public opinion to contend with. And right now, Israel's conduct of the last 15 months, the increasing numbers of photographs that we're seeing about what exactly was done in the Gaza Strip, bodies being pulled from rubble and the destruction of infrastructure has made it very difficult for any leader in the region to talk about a rapprochement or an establishment of diplomatic ties with Israel. There are going to have to be significant steps taken to get to a Palestinian place, whether that's one state or two, that the Palestinians are satisfied that their dignity...
Forgive me for interrupting. We're running out of time. I just really want to get a last question in. Again, we've mentioned sticks and stones and how Donald Trump obviously has a different approach. He's putting more pressure on the Netanyahu government and on Israel. But I'm wondering, why? Why is he doing it? And why can he do it when President Biden, who a lot of people accuse of not being very effective, but, actually felt like he genuinely wanted to, or seemed like he wanted to end the conflict. What is it, do you think, that President Trump is offering right now that President Biden wouldn't?
I believe President Biden worked from a moral center about what was the right thing to do, and Israel as a close ally, and his reluctance to do anything that would show daylight between the United States and Israel. President Trump is clearly more transactional. You make this happen for me, and I will do...
Exactly. So if he is transactional, what is he offering?
What is he offering? Well, again, that remains to be seen, but I believe clearly he's going to allow more West Bank activity by the government and settlers of Israel. And so that is something the region and the international community is going to have to keep a close eye on. I believe the West Bank is going to more fully be in play.
I'm sure we'll be discussing that particular topic again in weeks and months to come. For the moment, Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, President Emerita of the Middle East Policy Council. Madam, thank you for sharing your views with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.